Hello, everybody. So, what do I mean when I say unfolding the laundry? There's a lot in that little tiny sentence to unpack. If you made it through my last video, which was the longest video that will be placed on this channel, then you realize by now that sometimes when we look at a family, we only see what the family wants to show. We don't know what's behind the closed doors or locked up in the cabinets, tucked away in the closet, or what laundry is left unfolded and just stuffed in a basket somewhere. When we look at families like the White family, we see preachers, we see women who appear of a higher class than what they actually are. We see the grandparents with they celebrated their 75th wedding anniversary and still had a couple of extra years after that before my grandpa died. And then a few months after that, my grandma passed. And yes, even with all the issues and even the hate, I mean, I have to be honest. This channel is about honesty. There is a lot of hate, but there's also still that natural love. I call them my grandparents out of respect. My Aunt Beulah, my Aunt Becky, and my Aunt Cheryl. I know my Aunt Cheryl is gone. I don't know about my Aunt Becky, and I think my Aunt Beulah is still around. But they're still my aunts. My sister, Marla, she's still my sister. My brother, Kadon, still my brother, even though he denies my existence. When we see a family put together such as this one, the grandfather was the mayor, they had long years of marriage, they raised their kids. Their kids, all but Sam, turned out pretty decent. I mean, I don't have very many memories of my Aunt Becky. I know she's the one that taught me how to use a vacuum, but that was only because she wanted me to clean the house because she didn't want to. I mean, they're all those little, you know, I'm going to teach you this because I just don't want to do it myself moments with the whole family. My Aunt Cheryl, I don't have a lot of memories of talking to her, but being around her, folding clothes, wiping off cabinets, organizing things. Like organizing was like a big thing with her. Um, she was like super tiny, but she ended up driving a semi truck too. Yeah, just her mannerisms and stuff, like they were a lot like me. Not enough to say, oh, this is biologically my aunt, but I learned how to carry myself, I guess you could say, because of my Aunt Cheryl. Tiny but mighty. And my Aunt Beulah, in the other video, I went through that, some of the things that, we did out on her ranch and, the cooking and the cakes. And, you know, it wasn't all bad. It wasn't. But all that unfolded laundry left in the basket, just tossed to the side somewhere, that's what gets you. It's those little secrets. Every shirt, every pair of socks, every underwear, you know, everything has its story of why it's unfolded and crumpled up and just left in that basket. And that basket is where I grew up at with them. I was never part of that family. Like, never. From the abuse and the neglect and everything, as I was just an infant, all the way up until like the day my grandparents died. And even though I never had any respect given to me, I do still hold respect for them, or at least the ones that are my elders. And I don't mean elders as in the whole respect your elders, thing that people always say. I'm talking about the elders that actually taught me things. Like my Aunt Becky teaching me how to use the vacuum. My Aunt Cheryl teaching me how to turn on the washing machine and the dryer. Aunt Vila, letting me help her with the cakes and stuff that she used to make, her cookies, or different little snacks and stuff when I would be over to visit her when she was over at Grandma and Grandpa's. She'd sometimes be in the kitchen and, I'd be sitting there helping her mix up stuff, which I also did that with my mother's mom. My grandmother, that grandmother, I learned like literally everything from. But Aunt Mila had a twist to the way she made things, and it was good to learn both sides. My grandmother and grandfather, even though they're literally just my grandparents because of my birth certificate, I still call them grandma and grandpa because that's what they were for half of my life. Even though my grandmother didn't really act much of a grandmothery type, my grandfather, I didn't really speak too much about him in that last video. I think I mentioned him like once. But I had a pretty good relationship with my grandfather. It wasn't one of those to where I just wanted to go and hang out with him, or, I asked for him to take me places with him. It wasn't nothing like that. But when I was there, basically forced to be there, he was the one that I actually leaned to. He would take me out on the tractor. He was a lot like my stepdad. He didn't really see the whole gender binary thing. I mean, he was kind of set in his ways, like, a woman should be in the kitchen and a man should be in the field kind of thing. But when it come to me, he wasn't like that, like at all. My stepdad, Johnny, was the main one that got me all the boy stuff or the gender neutral stuff. If he took me to the powwows and he was trying to teach me like a new dance, he would first teach me his way of doing it. And then he would show me like the female version of it. There's not like really much of a difference. It's more about just like body positionings and, on the women, like the legs don't go up quite as high and, kind of stuff with the skirts and different things. But he gave me the option. He always taught me his way first, the masculine way. And then he would throw in a little bit of the feminine way. So with him, I was raised as two-spirit. I mean, not that it was actually called, and, I didn't have that terminology at that point in my life with him. But that's from today's modern terms to how he was raising me. He was raising me as two-spirit. He was giving me the freedom to choose which way I would go in life. If I went either way, one way, the other way, both ways, or neither way. And My grandfather was a lot like that too. He always sent my female cousins out with grandma. He would send them out with the aunts. He would always ask them to make him a sandwich or, you know, go wash out his gloves or, something that would be societally seen as a feminine task. But with me, he had me out on the tractor. He had me out in the fields. He had me out trying to find the horses and putting the bridles on them. And, you know, he was teaching me how to drive that tractor, even though I was like clumsy as fuck and, couldn't figure it out for the longest amount of time. But he would kick the ball with me in the front yard or play catch with me or things always leaning masculine. So now that I'm older and considering I never really had an issue with my grandfather growing up, he never beat me or anything like that. The only issue I really had was I didn't feel like I could trust him to tell him how his son was towards me. But I also know the man wasn't stupid and he seen it and he knew it and he would acknowledge it, but he wouldn't admit to it. And you're probably thinking, well, how can he acknowledge it and not admit it? Trust me, with him, it's completely two separate things. The fact that he was the mayor, Sam just knew he could get away with a lot of shit. He knew it. He was the baby, or not the baby. Cheryl was the baby. But he was the only boy. He could do no wrong in their eyes. He probably never had a whooping in his life. He's one of those that would literally stand there and, I don't know, stick a fork in a light socket, be electrocuted, hair standing on end, and still blame somebody else for it. And then whoever else he was blaming would automatically be the guilty one and they would be punished. Even though everybody was standing right there and watched him and he still had his hair on fire. That sums up Sam. But the unfolding the laundry, when it gets crumpled up and it gets thrown in a basket, and then the basket gets tossed in the corner, and then a box gets set on top of it, and then after that, you throw in a bag of cat food on top of that, and then later you come in, you toss your jacket, and your jacket goes up on top of it, and next thing you know, there's some more socks piled on top of it, and you think your whole basket is full of dirty clothes, when it's literally just a couple of different things. It's, unfolded at the bottom, crumpled up, with some other stuff piled up on top of it to cover that up. And then you see your dirty clothes on top of that. You think you're getting this big ass basket of all this dirty laundry when it's just a few pieces that make it really bad. That's what this is about. Those few pieces that just can't get any better. Like, there's no way to make them better. They're done, they're over with, but they're still lingering on. And because of my silence for so many years, everybody got away with it. Everybody in that family is like a dirty sock that just is piled up in that basket. It may be under that bag of cat food, or it may be under that jacket, or it may be under that, box of old silverware you're going to toss out. Like, it doesn't matter. But everybody in that family is like a dirty piece of laundry. They've got something that they're hiding, and then they cover up everybody else's things because they don't want their own shit to stink in public anyway. They all want to look like they're good and they're perfect and they can do no wrong. And if you're on the outside of that family, like I was from the day of my birth, then everything seems to turn against you. everything that you don't want to happen happens. And that one thing that you're dying for more than anything in this world, you just never get it. It's never there. Sometimes it's right at your fingertips, but you can't grasp it because they jerk that shit back really quick. Then they hold it over your head. And then they make fun of you because you let it slip away. When I talk about them being the ministers and stuff, Sam, and I think a couple of my cousins went in and got it too, but he couldn't preach twice in the same church. They wouldn't allow it. They would hear him out that first time and, make it all like a big ass deal and, congratulate him and praise him and, you know, and then he'd call him up a couple months later. Hey, I'm going to be back in town. I'm going to passing through on a Sunday. You mind if I stand up there and say a few words and, you know, share the praise of God with y'all? And they'd be like, oh, well, we've already got 2 or 3 people lined up. And I mean, you can call us back maybe the next time. And, that next time never come because they couldn't handle him. They knew no matter what sermon he was given, you could tell it was based on the lies in his life. The whole honor thy father and mother thing while he's molesting me, the molestation turns to rape. There was child abuse my whole life, child neglect. And he's telling everybody in the congregation, to honor your father and mother, while he himself didn't even honor his own father and mother, didn't do anything to deserve his children to honor him. He can give a ministry, I've heard him do a sermon about loving the animals and uh, I think they ended up taking up collection or something and they were going to like donate it to some animal shelter or something that day. But when I was about 6, maybe, I had a little black weenie dog. Her name was Maisie Ann. And I was outside on the porch with her, and he pulled up. He got out of his truck. He walked around the yard. He got back in his truck. He shut the door. He called my dog to him. And as she approached the truck, he backed up and ran over her on purpose. He started laughing about it. He picked up her dead body after she kicked around for a good 2-3 minutes. I'm hysterical sitting there on the porch, or jumping up and down by this point on the porch. He waits until she completely passes, and he threw her dead body at my feet and told me I should take better care of my dog. When we was over at the greenhouse, it was right after Mom moved in with Grandma. I had already kind of been staying with Grandma most of the time, but when Mom actually moved in, we had to go back over there to get some stuff. And I was with her. And I was like, I don't know, a little bit over 5 years old. And I had my kittens there. They were stray cats. I have a thing with stray cats, but this stray cat was up under the house, and she had kittens, and this one little kitten was like super sweet and loving and would always come to me, even though the mama and the other like 4 or 5 of them was like wild as fuck. They would hiss and scratch and run and like, but this one cute little yellow kitty cat with a little white spot above his eye. And then on one ear, those little hairs that go kind of up at the triangle part where the hairs kind of stand up. He had that on one ear, but he didn't have it on the other ear. Like one ear was super fuzzy, but the other ear was like slick. Perfect, good little kitty. I love that thing. I would tote that thing around with me. I always made sure to give it back to its mommy. It stayed outside. It was still little. Um, I was just always with that little kitten, and he was mad because my mom was packing up some stuff, and one of our friends, his name was Kenny, was fixing to come over in the truck and load up whatever she had packed. So I was sitting outside, and Sam was by his truck, and I had that kitten in my hand. Well, my mom had called me in. Um, she, I want to say she was asking me if I wanted to take some toys or if I wanted to leave some there, which I'm pretty sure I probably wanted to take them all with me. But anyway, I had put the kitty down and it started to go run back to its mom. And I seen him walking, but I didn't think anything about it. I just figured he was going to come in the house too. So I ran in and I asked mom what was going on. And when me and my mom walked out that front door with a couple of trash bags, I had a little kind of like a Walmart sack or whatever. And mom had a couple of trash bags in her hands to sit on the porch waiting for Kenny. We looked over to the corner of the house and he had that kitten and he smacked it in the head with a hammer and threw it in the back of his truck. I started crying. I screaming at him, telling him he was evil, he was mean. I even told him he was going to go to hell. And actually, my mom didn't correct me that day. Normally, when I'd say something like that, she'd, hey, 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 don't be. But yeah, that day she didn't. She didn't even correct me on any of it. But he literally waited until we had walked out that door, and then he smacked that little kitten. Not, maybe 6, 7 weeks old. Like I think they were just being weaned. I didn't know how old it was then. But from my experience with cats, I'm pretty sure it's probably about 6, 7 weeks old at that point. He waits until we get there in perfect view of him for him to smack it in the head with the hammer and throw it in the back of his truck. I started screaming. I was telling him he was going to go to hell. He was a murderer. Like, I was being very super dramatic, but I had reason to be because he had just killed my kitten. And he told me he didn't know what I was talking about. He tried to tell me I was seeing things, that there was nothing there. I kept asking him to put me up in the back of the truck. He wouldn't do it. He told me there was some oil and stuff back there that I would get all dirty. But I know he killed my cat. And my cat was nowhere to be found after that. And I know he threw it in the back of his truck. And that evil son of a bitch was trying to tell me that I was seeing things. This is that unfolded laundry. He was mean to animals. He was mean to his wives. He was mean to his children. He took advantage of the elderly. He took advantage of the disabled. He was a con man when it come to the ministry. But everybody in Wapanaka thought he walked the earth like a saint.